Thank you, Cordell, and thank you to the CTO and the Broadcasting Commission for the invitation to be here. As Cordell reminded me, I did attend this conference once before, but it wasn't physically, it was only virtually. And I can tell you this is much more enjoyable, especially the shake people's hands and talk to them in person, but also I get to eat not the great food, so that's a definite bonus. So I'm going to talk about ATSC 3.0 today, a little bit about ATSC very quickly, an overview of the standard, and then the status. So ATSC is a standards development organization. We started actually in 1983. Before anybody was really thinking about digital, these were all analog enhanced systems back then. Our focus as a due process standards organization is on terrestrial broadcasting. So while we work with the cable industries and the satellite direct-to-home industries very closely, they're members and they participate in our work, our focus is on optimization of terrestrial broadcasting, which I think is critically important. And I like the theme of this conference and the attitude I've heard this morning, because there's no question about the future of broadcasting, whether it's going to happen or not. It's just how we're going to do it, and how we can make it the most successful. So ATSC 3.0 is the next generation standard. As you heard earlier from Tom and Myra, the ATSC standard, the original DTV standard was developed and has been implemented in the US and other countries. And so this is adding on to that. This is a new standard that starts from as a complete new system. So it's not backwards compatible. So the original ATSC 1 receivers will not receive ATSC 3.0 without an adapter or without Wi-Fi. Now, there's lots of easy ways to do this, but the reason we did that is we wanted it to be a lot better. And sometimes you have to start things over to make it a lot better, to really go orders of magnitude improvement, and that's what we've done with ATSC 3.0. So I'm putting this up here, we're not going to go through the whole protocol stack, but I want to note two things about this. Is that one is that we define the protocols for both broadband and broadcast together. I'll talk a little bit about this more, but that means we're trying to think of it as a system. There was a great comment earlier this morning about broadcasting not being a silo anymore. And what we're saying is, to not be a silo, you need to conform to the standards in the major parts of the industry, particularly the internet. But the other thing that's important here is the use of IP, or Internet Protocol, as the backbone of the standard. So instead of using a television-centric backbone as all the other DTV standards do, including ATSC, which is MPEG-2, that's a television-centric backbone. And it's great technology, and when we adopted it 20, 25 years ago, it was terrific. But the world has changed, and the world is IP. In fact, broadcast television plants are also going IP. So if we don't do this for our transmission link, it'll be the only part that won't be Internet Protocol at some point. So we don't want broadcasting to be a silo within the technology world. We want to enable different kinds of hybrid services and local insertion, and we want to take advantage of the evolution speed of the internet. We want to be able to have the tools that are used for the creation of content for the internet, as well as the people who are trained and are experienced in operating to create content for the internet, and the content itself that's already been created for the internet could easily be ported to this new system. So I'm going to talk about a few more elements of ATSC 3.0. One of our goals is to have as robust a transmission as we can, and including easy reception by the consumer. Now, I'm not going to go into the details of the technology here, but we have spent a lot of time in this particular area. One thing we did that's unique is we added to the signal what's called the Bootstrap signal. And that has a few functions. Number one, it's receivable on very low signal levels, extremely low signal levels, and it can be used for synchronizing the receiver. Number two, it allows for evolution. So it can signal ATSC 3.0, all the other higher layers, or in the future it'll be able to signal that some other kind of system is there, some other kind of modulation, and how it works. So this helps make our system very evolvable. Another thing that it does, it allows us to send some bits in a very robust way that can be used for things like emergency alert system applications. And in fact, this can be used to wake up a receiver, because if you want to alert the public, you can't be guaranteed their television's going to be on. This actually, in an emergency, could turn the TV on in the middle of the night. Now, the consumer has to opt for this. So all these things I talk about that might happen automatically in the future or provide new kinds of services, they're things that the consumer has to opt in. So it's, we respect privacy, and we want to make sure that that's the consumer's choice. The other area besides the Bootstrap is the actual physical layer transmission performance. Oops. And so you see that curve down there. That blue line is the theoretical performance of a system. And at the bottom of the curves, it's saying you can have a more robust signal, but you get a lower number of fewer bits through the channel. And at the upper end of the curve, you may have a less robust system, but you get more bits through the channel. So we offer a lot of different points on the curve for this capability. Now DVB-T2 has a lot of this also, so it's not unique. Though this system is the closest to the theoretical performance that we think is possible. So it's very robust. Another concept that ATSC 3.0 employs is physical layer pipes, or PLPs. And these pipes actually can carry different transmission configurations. So I mentioned before that you might operate at a certain point on that curve for robustness versus number of bits. You can actually do that for different services. You can code them differently. So you could have 4 different services that are set up differently. One might be set up, as an example, for mobile reception, mobile in a car, handheld reception of devices. Another one might be more optimized to get to a home with a stationary receiver. And we can operate these these multiple pipes at the same time. And a lot of that, as I mentioned, is for mobile, but it's for other applications. Now, just to confuse you a little bit more, there's some other capabilities we can layer on top of those pipes. We can feed different things through the pipes. So one of the things we can do in the standard is we're using HEVC compression, but we've also have integrated HEVC's capability of a scalable video coding. So what's scalable video coding, for those of you who don't know? The idea is that you send a base layer of the video. So base layer may in this case be high definition television. And that base layer will be receivable by all kinds of receivers, mobile receivers, handheld receivers, and this fixed receiver in the home. But in addition, we'll also send on another part of the channel through another pipe, we'll send an enhancement layer, and that may just be aimed at the home. So what happens is the base layer is received by the mobile receiver, and you get mobile HDTV in this example. At home, the receiver gets both the base layer and the enhancement layer and might provide UHDTV or higher resolution HDTV. So this is just, these are examples of flexibility. The good news is this is flexible. The bad news is you have to decide how to use it. Single frequency networks, that's an area where we've spent a lot of time trying to optimize the system and the specifications to enable single frequency networks. And in the United States, this is usually a high power. We'll probably stick with the traditional model of a high power, high tower transmitter, which is kind of one central transmitter in the market. But then in areas around the market where the signal needs to be filled in because there's terrain or man-made buildings kind of thing, we'll be able to supplement that signal with a single frequency network or repeater. So we are talking about television systems here, and an important part of that is telling stories, right? And we want to have enhanced video and audio in our new standard. Oops. So some of our key features in terms of video are ultra high definition television, HDR, which I'll talk about, wider color gamut, high frame rate, enhanced HDTV, so it's 1080p progressive scan at higher frame rates. And this efficiency is provided by HEVC, the coding technology that was discussed earlier. Just to pick on a couple of these things, when you talk about UHDTV, you're getting more clarity. It's higher resolution. There are going to be more dots on the screen. It also takes up a lot of bandwidth to transmit it. And although this system is highly efficient, it will take a lot of bits to transmit UHDTV. With high dynamic range, you get better contrast. This is really the big talk of the industry right now in terms of picture quality, not only in the United States, but around the world. In fact, the BBC has done a lot of work in this area, and they've been very active in ATSC, contributing some of that technology. But it's really around the world. There's a lot of thinking that consumers are not going to easily notice the switch to UHD-TV unless they're sitting very close to this large screen. But with HDR, even across the room, you can tell the difference if you have this high dynamic range. So you see much more contrast, much more details, many more details. Wider color gamut, the same thing. We went a long way in HDTV to improve the color capabilities of the system, so consumers saw better colors. This is even better when we talk about wide color gamut. Audio, we never want to forget audio. Immersive Sound provides kind of the height and distance perspective. How many of you have heard Immersive Sound? Any of you? A few. Let me just tell you that it sounds crazy when you describe it. It sounds like, why? Who needs that? What a waste of bits, what a waste of trouble. Consumers aren't going to want that. I would say to this, hear it. And hear it with different applications, and you'll be amazed. The other thing is, it's not going to necessarily require speakers all hung up in your living room, 20, 30 speakers in your living room. There are new technologies that make it easier to implement with speakers in a home or with a sound bar. You can even hear immersive sound on headphones, on phones. So there's an array of opportunity there in terms of audio, immersive audio. But there's also audio personalization, and just two examples of that. Those of you who are older like me know that as you get older, most people start to lose their hearing. And when they're watching television, they tend to turn the volume up, way up. And they keep turning it up, and it doesn't really get any better. They can't hear any better. All they do is bug the rest of the family, right? I see some of you know about this. But if the consumer can actually have a control where they can raise the dialogue level up compared to the background music or the background sound, then they actually can hear better. Because it's that differentiation between the dialogue and the other sound that makes a big difference. And so that's just a wonderful technology. Also, another application is choosing the commentary, whether it's language or the style or maybe you are watching a sports event, and you want to listen to the commentary by the guy who's on your side, rooting for your team, so you get a nice biased thing. I think we could do that with the news these days. Oh, that is what we do with the news these days. Enough about my country. So accessibility is, of course, an area that we also focused on, very important. Video description services and closed captioning. A lot of advances in those areas, and we've implemented them in our standard. Hybrid and interactive. Myra mentioned this several times this morning. This is really important part of our standard. There we go. So as I mentioned, we can deliver content over broadband or over broadcast, and we want to make sure that it's seamlessly can be put together in the receiver so the consumer doesn't even necessarily know where that content's coming from. But this allows you to leverage the attributes of broadband as well as leveraging the attributes of broadcast. And we want to be able to synchronously and seamlessly switch between the content. So there are a lot of use cases for this. It could be targeted advertising, as an example, where you may have a national show or even a local show on, and that's being delivered by broadcast, but you know the consumer is looking for a certain kind of product they're in the market for, or they're a certain demographic. You can have that specific television commercial be sent to their TV. Either that comes over broadcast or over broadband. And we have all kinds of mechanisms to support those kinds of services. And interactivity, I said I didn't quite update this slide here, but our interactivity is based on HTML5. So it's internet-centric. It's standards of the W3C, the World Wide Web Consortium, as opposed to a specific television kind of system. We want to make sure that the tools and the technologies are as widely as available as possible. So again, broadcasting is not in that silo. Emergency alerts, we think this is critically important for all nations. We've all seen, continue to see devastating things happen where communications is really a challenge. Broadcasting, I know in the United States for certain, broadcasting always seems to be up and on the air when we have these disasters, and it's an important way to communicate. This allows us to get specific emergency alert content through to both first responders as well as consumers. And it isn't just a few lines of text. It's a rich content, including maps and all kinds of other information that people would need during these times. And when you combine this with the fact we can transmit to mobile devices, just think of how many people we could alert very quickly because it's broadcasting. It doesn't have to go through a multicast network. It can easily get to the consumer very quickly, and it can be targeted by location kinds of aspects or other. And I mentioned earlier that we could wake up devices that are quote sleeping. Okay, so security, it's important. We have it. We're moving fast here. So the status of the standard, it's actually, ATSC 3.0 is actually 20-some standards documents. They are all just about done over the coming weeks. This skyscraper will be complete. They're all published already, but we'll be putting the I's and crossing the T's, dotting the I's and crossing the T's on them. Oh, there we go. So we've made a lot of progress. We like to say we kind of hit mainstream last spring at the NAB convention. Our colleagues in South Korea are already on the air. All the broadcasters in Seoul are on the air with ATSC 3.0 and ultra high definition television. And they'll have the whole country on the air in time for the February Olympics in South Korea. My good friends at the FCC, Tom and others, have done great work, and last week they adopted the authorized use of ATSC 3.0. So that was a big milestone. It was an expected milestone, but still it's nice to happen. ITUR, we are certainly believe ITUR remains very important, and we have started to submit documents through the U.S. delegation. It's likely that documents will come from multiple delegations, and we hope to get ATSC 3.0 standards into the recommendations of ITUR. So thank you, and look forward to your questions after Luke's presentation.
Thank you very much, Mark. Tris?